Thank you both. That was incredible. A lot to pick apart. We have financial services, we have Gen Z and generational differences, we have ag tech. We have a lot to pick apart. Julia, I'm interested in you to start with. You must have had a breakthrough in arriving to this topic and being fascinated and passionate by Generation Z and the implications of this generation becoming the biggest consumer group. What was the breakthrough that brought you to this topic that drove you to go so deep?
So we're going to have to get a little bit radically candid here when I tell you this story. I was at an event in the wealth management business, and a CEO of a broker-dealer who had seen that I was blogging about Generation Z came up and kind of made fun of me for it. And he said, "You know, Julia, you do realize that these people have no money." And I was, as the mother of 3 young boys, I was really bummed out by what he had to say. And I thought that his remark in many ways encapsulated exactly the cynicism of the financial services industry, where we have really failed consumers we've pushed product at the expense of investment acumen and financial awareness, and the way that Americans, you see, are living paycheck to paycheck. We really have an opportunity to do better, and so I made a decision to be the change that I wanted to see, where our business really deeply did care about what was going on with next generations.
Fantastic. And then Sona, on your side, on the topic of generations and generational differences, at John Deere, how do you look at that? Do you segment? Do you use personas? Like, how do you overall take a look at generational differences?
Yeah, so I'm happy to report that ag is a very booming segment because most of our customers are baby boomers. So that definitely helps set the stage for that. And what we've learned is age is a number in the sense of technology adoption. So we had lots of research trying to segment people by age group, behavior, adoption of precision ag tech. And what was interesting to see that irrespective of the age criteria, there was a sense of trying to see where is the value. If we were able to show value, it didn't matter. Like if you're talking about Gen Xers or and millennials, I don't think it's a very small segment in our business. It's less than 5%. But between Gen Xers and baby boomers and the silent generation, and we do have a good mix of silent generation in there as well. I believe around 20%. But the idea was it didn't matter as a criteria because the farmers really wanted to make sure they saw value of the tech. It was easy to use, and they trusted what we were showing. And that was ubiquitous across the board. So that was our take on trying to see what flavors.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it really comes down to, we're talking about customer and consumer preferences here. Could either of you share a story or talk about any decisions that had to be made in order to approach a customer segment, approach a specific generational group? Any key decisions that you had to make and had to go through, and what did that look and feel like?
I don't know if you have one.
I'm happy.
Yeah, go ahead.
Happy to take it. So I am in the high net worth and ultra high net worth business, so not in the retail segments. And 10 years ago, we started seeing that the older, and our clients tend to skew older also, just because I happen to be obsessed with Gen Z as a personal thing, but our clients are definitely the same as Sona's on the older side. But what we were seeing is that our clients were actually using the online site more often than retail clients and more than business banking customers. And that was because they were able to afford the devices that were then kind of populating the market, right? Because if you think about 10 years ago, it was right after the smartphone had been come to market. So what we had to make the case of is, look, just because our clients are older, they're actually leading the charge for devices, and we absolutely have to make sure that our tools and technology are keeping pace with their adoption of devices. So.
Yeah, great. And maybe I'll add to that in that the mantra that we are trying to follow right now is create prototypes, test early, take it to market, see how our customers are actually using our products, and then you kind of realize certain quirks in their behavior and then that we had not accounted for. And as I said, it's less around the generational divide, it's just making sure we are able to translate our features and incorporate it really intricately into their workflow. So if they intuitively understand how they know how the operations work, does our tools follow that workflow? And that just comes, and maybe this is a feedback to user experience, UX designers everywhere, is some things are really cute and small icons are great and less words are wonderful, but think about your audience, and if they don't get it, you have failed. It could be the cutest thing in the world, but if it's not getting used, that's your scorecard. So that's just my instant feedback on that.
Awesome, thank you both. Both of you have mentioned constraints in either your talks or our conversation here. Sona, the constraints of nature and of physics. Yes. And Julia, the constraints, there's many, but of cynicism within the financial services industry. Can you talk a little bit how you overcome those specific constraints, or how you view them as maybe opportunities versus blockers?
Yeah, so, and I did list the many constraints that we faced. What's interesting about constraints is they did not pop up on a single day, right? These are constraints, these are macro trends that's been ongoing. What really changed the story or flipped the switch for us was the advancement of technology. So once we realized that, hey, a lot of these problems could be solved through good use of technology, taking that big data and really mining the hell out of it and getting good insights for the customers. That's where the value was in terms of changing a negative into a positive. Because I always feel like these all build up, and then you get to a point where you're kind of forced to think outside the box, and then you look around, you scan your environment, you scan everything, and you're like, oh my God, this is an opportunity. Why don't I just grab that and see how far I can go? So it's just constantly being vigilant. And I think the next, there's so many constraints. So as I told the story about the breakthrough and the technology advancements that are helping us, it's not a slam dunk. In our world, connectivity is a huge issue. If the pipes don't work, data don't come home. That's not good. So connectivity, 5G or otherwise, rural connectivity is a challenge. So that's something that we're addressing holistically. Another constraint that is around just the data standardization. We're getting data not only from our equipment, we're getting data from our partners. We have an open platform with 160 connected software partners that are constantly enriching our platform, but we still have to work a lot to get that standardized and used. So there's opportunities, but then you hit the next limit.
Yeah, can I just follow a thread really quickly? You said, once we realize the power of technology, that's a big thing. Like, how does that happen? How does this realization happen? Did somebody, read a Harvard Business Review article and then came to the office and said, I got it, guys. We need to use technology. So how did that realization occur? Yeah,
so I know disruption's a great buzzword. Everybody's worried about being disrupted or being the disruptor. Let's be that, So I think it was just our understanding, especially as a 180 company, a 8-year-old company, we just internally, our leadership, just our internal conversations, we always were talking about not to get too comfortable, and also this notion about good's the enemy of great, right? The idea that we're good and this is comfortable, we don't want to stretch ourselves, but truly keeping an eye on the Googles of the world, the Amazons. We are constantly scanning our environment to say, hey, where is our next threat going to come from? And what are they doing with technology? So I think it was a proactive approach to just not getting too comfortable. I mean, that's the best way I could say, because I don't think there was a single conversation where we're like, oh, we're doing great. Let's just do what we're doing. This is going to, I'm sure, didn't want to be the next Encyclopedia Britannica for sure. So those were some of the, we had enough horror stories, and those were in Harvard Business Reviews.
Okay.
Can I add something
Absolutely.
to the idea of disruption? I work, in an industry that has a very strong hold on its customers, and I am faced with quite a bit of cynicism about the degree to which fintechs and neobanks are a potential threat to us. And what I really have tried to make people understand is that disruption hasn't happened because you had the Great Recession, right, of 2008, which caused for an entire generation of people, and I'm talking about boomers, to lose so much money in their portfolios that they have held on to power in lots of different sectors in order to make up their own personal portfolios. Well, these people didn't have primary haptic memories of technology, so they tended to hang on to their bias and not invest at the rate to which I think if Gen X, just by nature of how we grew up, would have maybe done. So I think you're seeing in a lot of sectors pent-up demand where people that didn't lean into technology as much as they probably should have or could have, if there wasn't the recession, has really changed the dynamic potentially of when these generations turn over, which again, in sheer numbers, will start to happen over the next 10 years.
Yeah, and in financial services, we're talking about the great wealth transfer, right? So $30 trillion is going to turn over from boomers to millennials or X in the next 30 or 40 years.
You've been reading my blog, haven't you?
I have. So how does one prepare for, it's happening on both sides. How does one prepare for that movement from one to the next, and the farms changing hands from one to the next? How does an organization prepare for that level of change?
So, again, it doesn't happen overnight. I feel like we shouldn't, there's a sense of urgency, there's a sense of not getting complacent, but you also are paying close attention to your customers, their behavior. So staying constantly in touch with your customers, understanding their challenges, making it your own. I think that's definitely part of it. The other part of it is actually having a purpose and intentionality to focus on solving that. And some of it, it's not all organic. So I don't think we should put our pressures on ourselves to say we're going to build everything by ourselves. So our answer was a recent one is we acquired a company in Silicon Valley called Blue River. The See and Spray technology that I just talked about was an acquisition. It's a startup. And we let it be a startup. We didn't try to give it the big deer hug right away. And so what we have done is we've leveraged the talent and the innovative thinking of that company to fuel a lot of the new technology. And again, what we bring to the table is the opportunity to truly make it mainstream. So it's that understanding of, this is an opportunity, so stay connected with your customers, have the intentionality to actually focus and deliver on it. And lastly, a public commitment always helps. I don't know, some other speaker today had talked about go out there and make a public commitment. Our commitment was actually at CES. We was at the AI segment of the CES booth in Vegas earlier this way, and we essentially shouted from the rooftops that we were a tech company. Now that's not good. You can't go back on that type of a public commitment, and so that we're holding our feet to the fire.
Yeah, it's similar to what Kelly said this morning.
Yeah.
You sign up for a marathon, the
That's
first thing
right,
you do
that's
is
the
you
one.
post it on Facebook, and now you're accountable.
Yes. Yes.
Back to the great wealth transfer, some seismic shift.
Yep.
How does an organization like that prepare for something like that?
Well, I think what you have to do is stop thinking of it as a threat and think of it as an opportunity. I have recently, because of my passion for Gen Z, have started spending time with our advisors that have $100 to $200 million clients. What you find with next generational wealth transfer is the third and fourth generation often lose the money that was made by the earlier generations because they lacked purpose. those of you that follow our business very much know that it's called, do you have a purpose-driven life? And often kids that are getting large sums of money have no purpose. So I have been working to talk to those advisors to say, I actually think that that wealth, which has often been created inside of a family that has managed to corner a particular market, we're actually saying you should have the Gen X and boomers be talking to the teenagers of the family about how and what is next for that particular family business. Because God knows I go home and talk to my kids about what's going on with esports and gaming, and it has changed my whole perspective and my life. But there is a whole other segment of the world that could go out and actually turn this on its head and make a name for these children that are inheriting so much wealth, particularly in my segments, to be the opposite of the anti-purpose driven life, but to be the generation that fuels what happens next with their family legacy.
Yeah, I mean, it mirrors some of what Brian was saying this morning, and deliberately seeking these alternative, perhaps uncomfortable perspectives, and making time to talk to people who are well outside of his industry to generate more information and more insight. So we're in our final couple of minutes. So one question for each of you. You have a platform here. You have a whole bunch of people with blue lights around their ears, ready to listen. If you have one piece of advice for this group as it relates to customer experience, to product development, to digital business, one thing, what is the golden arrow?
Well, my advice is, if you don't have a meaningful relationship with someone who is younger than you, I highly suggest that you go find someone. You know, as much as everything stays the same, everything is changing too. And I feel like, in my perspective, I see so many older generations wagging their tail or finger about all the things that they've done well and saying that the next generation is going to screw it all up. I actually have a very different view on that, and I believe that the next generation has an opportunity to make things better. I think if you look at the big social issues of our time, like Me Too and climate change, there's no question that our generation didn't get it all right. So I suggest going and finding someone who's younger than you and understand that they have something to teach you. You don't just have something to teach them. And even if that means going home and playing a video game with your teenager, I say do it.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yeah,
Sona?
and I'll just say that get uncomfortable. That's the advice, and get comfortable being uncomfortable, if that's okay. Because I feel like all the traditional boundaries that we've drawn are blurring. Our competition is, our thinking around our competition is changing, because traditionally, as John Deere, we have a set list of competitors, which are ag equipment providers. That is no longer the case. Our competitors are going to come from very different parts of the industry. Our partners are going to come from very different parts. And so just constantly being vigilant, seeking out new opportunities, looking at technology every step of the way, and trying to uncover wherever potential can be unlocked. So I just say embrace the uncomfortable.
Amazing, amazing. I have certainly learned so much from both of you in the lead up to this event and from our conversation here today. I'm grateful for you sharing your time and your wisdom and your fortitude with us. Thank you both. Round of applause for our panel, please.